Thank you for tuning in Metric Hub. Today I'm going to do a revision on management communication. Right. Let's go to question 1.3. Read the scenario and answer the questions. Right. So let's go to 1.3. 1. Draw a graph of the communication process in the scenario. Right. So this is the graph. Right. This is the graph. A sender, who is the encoder, sends a message through the media to the receiver, who then decodes. During the process, there is noise, a feedback is given, and during the feedback process, there is also noise, and the feedback is given to the sender. Right? That's the diagram that you are expected to draw. This is the diagram that you are expected to draw. So don't forget that communication starts with the sender, right? Ends with the sender when he receives the what? The feedback. Right. So let's move on to 1.3. 1.3. 1.3. Let's go to 1.3. 1.32. 1.32. Right. So differentiate between interpersonal communication and intrapersonal communication. Right. You can copy and complete the following table, or you can write only the answer next to A to D. So A, the answer A, right, which is in terms of definition. So we're going to give definition for interpersonal communication. So interpersonal communication is communication between two people or groups. Right, that's interpersonal communication. Communication between two people or more, or groups of people. Right, so let's go to B. Right, definition for extrapersonal. Extrapersonal communication is communication within oneself. Communication within oneself. That's what we call intrapersonal communication, right? So C, let's give an example of interpersonal communication. Interpersonal communication, example in the scenario, right? Here, Tando talking or greeting Naledi greeting Tando. Right, that's interpersonal. And then D, extrapersonal, when Naledi thinks to herself, I wonder what is happening to Naledi, sorry, to Tando. What is happening to Tando? That's intrapersonal communication. So let's move on to question 1.33. Question 1.33. Right. It says, name 4 factors that influence communication. So we are going to write factors which influence communication here. 1.33. 1.33 factors influencing communication. We have one, the personality of the person, the personality. We also have emotions. There is also frame of references. And lastly, reasoning. So these are the factors that affects communication. These are the factors which affects communication. Personality, emotions, frame of reference, reasoning. Right, let's move on to question 1.34. Right. Name the main factor from these given in question 1.33 that influence Tando's communication with her sister. That's an emotions. 1.34 is an emotions. It shows that Tando was very angry, right? From your response. Right, let's go to 1.35. Support your answer to question 1.35 by giving a valid reason for your answer. Why did you say emotions? Right, so Tando was very emotional. When was very emotional? Tando was very emotional after having a fight with her boyfriend. Tando was very emotional after having a fight with her boyfriend. It's emotional, right? So let's move on to 1.36. Define fatigue communication and give any practical example. Define fatigue communication and give any practical example. Fatigue communication. Fatigue 1.36. Fatigue communication is communication whereby you use words to create a sociable atmosphere. Words used to convey a message rather than a feeling. To convey a message rather than a feeling. Words used to convey a message rather than a feeling. Right. So, examples of fatigue semiology includes how are you? How are you? That's a fatigue semiology. That's an example of a fatigue semiology. Right. Let's go to question Question 2.1. Question 2.1. Right. What do you understand by a healthy self-image? Right. A healthy self-image, it is when one have a good ideal of yourself, when one have a good image of yourself, when one has a good image of yourself. A good image of yourself. That's what you call a what? A healthy self-image. Right. Right. So whereby you feel good, you are proud of yourself, you feel confident, and proud of oneself. Right. Let's go to question 2.2. 2.2. Does Paul have a good or a poor self-image? Right. Paul, does he have good or a poor self-image? Right. Right. So let's read the scenario here. Right. Maybe that's Paul. Maybe the reason I'm such a loser is because of my chronic self-criticism and lack of confidence. Right. And then this is Vincent who is saying, no, that's not it. Right. So Paul does not have what? A positive self-image. Paul does not have, Paul has a poor self-image. Poor self-image. Paul have so poor self-image. Right. Right. So let's go to 2.3. 2.3. Right. Give a reason for your answer. Right. Right. Poor is because he has negative perception about himself. Negative perception of himself. His negative perception of himself. Right. So let's go to 2.5, sorry, 2.4. 2.4, provide Paul with 5 guidelines to improve his self-image. So we're talking about ways to improve self-image, right? Ways to improve self-image. Ways to improve self-image. Right. So this includes ways to improve self-image. This includes control your thoughts, control your feelings, never say bad things about yourself, never say bad things about yourself, and also avoid people who makes you worthless, avoid people who make you worthless, right? And also be prepared of what you have already achieved, which is pat yourself on the back. On the back when you achieve something. When you achieve something, right? And lastly, take failure and disappointments. Take or see failure and disappointments in a positive way. In a positive way, right? So one is to control your thoughts, your feelings, never say bad things about yourself, avoid people who make you worthless, pat yourself on the back when you achieve something, see failure or disappointments in a positive light. Right, let's go to 2.5. In the cartoon, Paul and Vincent are drinking tea or coffee at work. Which need, according to Maslow, is being fulfilled by the employer, right? So tea and coffee, that's maybe tea break, ne? Tea break. So which need was being satisfied by the employer? That's what you call a physical need. That's a physical need. 2.5. 2.5. That's a physical need. Physical need. Right. Physical need. Need to survive, which is the need to survive. Right. Let's go to 2.6. 2.6. Give practical examples of how the employer can assist employees to fulfill the following needs in the scenario in the workplace as depicted in Maslow's hierarchy, right? 2.61, security needs. How can the employer fulfill these security needs? Security needs, right? So here, employer can assure a safe working condition, a safe working condition, or environment, job security, job security, right? And also a secured workplace, a secured working environment, a secured working environment, right? So these are what you call security needs that can be administered by the employer, right? According to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Right, let's go to 2.62, affiliation needs, right? Affiliation needs is the same as social need. Affiliation, affiliation, or a social needs. Yes, those are the needs to belong, a sense of belonging, the needs to be loved, right? So how can the employer administer this type of a need? How can an employer administer this type of a need? right? By allowing employees to hold social functions at work, allowing employees to hold social functions at work, right? By welcoming new employees, even by holding team building sessions or activities, or by holding sports activities, right? So let's go to, this one is 1.62. Let's go to 2.63, which is esteem needs. How can an employer provide with esteem needs? What can he provide to satisfy this level of needs? Right. So esteem needs is the need to be recognized and to be appreciated. Recognition, right, and appreciated. So how can an employer appreciate an employee, right? By providing these needs. So you can maybe offer promotion, offer awards, administer bonuses, right? And give maybe incentives. Can give incentives to maybe long servicing employees, right? So let's go to 2.64. Question 2.64. Self-actualization needs. Self-actualization. How can an employer do? What can an employer do to fulfill this need? Self-actualization need, which is the need to reach one's full potential. The need to reach one's full potential. So how can the employer assist the employee to satisfy this need, right? You can offer training programs. They might be in service training programs, or we can allow the employee to further his education if he is interested, wants to reach full potential, right, in education. And also paid traveling expenses. Can pay traveling expenses. Right. So let's move on to question 2.7. Name five perceptual barriers that could occur during Paul and Vincent. So Perceptual barriers are barriers which are due to differences in 2.7. Right. So perceptual barrier is the way we perceive things. People perceive things differently due to maybe differences in attitude, differences in educational levels, might be differences in needs, might be differences in personalities, maybe due to differences in religion and differences in background, in background. Right? These are what we call perceptual barriers, differences in educational levels, needs, reasoning, personality, religion, background. Right? So let's go to 2.8. Define gatekeeping. Define gatekeeping. Define gatekeeping. So gatekeeping is a deliberate attempt to create communication barriers because of fear of consequences. When one creates a barrier because he's afraid of consequences. All right. 2.8 is a deliberate attempt by a person to create a, a communication barrier right. When someone deliberately create communication barrier in fear of consequences. For example, the manager avoiding the CEO because he did not submit the report. That's gatekeeping. That's gatekeeping, a deliberate attempt to create a barrier in fear of consequences. Right. Let's move on to question 2.9. Give a practical example of barrier of gatekeeping. Give a practical example of gatekeeping. All right. 2.9. 2.9. 2.9. Practical example of gatekeeping. Right. A secretary was told to screen incoming calls calls by the manager. It means that he wants to avoid some people. He wants to avoid some people. So he creates a communication barrier deliberately. Right. Let's go to question 3. Question 3. Right. Interviewing. Right. So this is the interview scenario. All right. This is the interview scenario. So let's just look for answers. Right. Who is the interviewer in the scenario? 3.1. Who is the interviewer? Right. That's Miss Motsim. Who is the interviewer? Miss Motsim. That's the interviewer. A person who is going to interview Mr. Aradebe. Right. Who is the receiver in the receiver in the interview? Right. The receiver is Mr. Radeb. Right. Is the person who is going to be interviewed. Is the person who is going to be interviewed. Right. Right. So let's go to question 3.2. Question 3.2. 3.3. Right. Let's go to question 3.3. Right. 3.3. Find an example of each of the following types of questions from the interview. Quote the exact words. Right. Specific questions are questions that require a specific answer. Specific questions are those questions that require a specific answer, right? So I'm just gonna write, for example, how are you? Specific questions requires a specific answer. For example, e.g., how old are you? Right. So let's move on to 3.32. Open-ended questions. Right. So these questions requires you to give a detailed information. Supposed to give an in-depth information. Right. For example, tell me about yourself. And then let's go to 3.33. Reflective questions. Right. So reflective questions are questions which requires a specific response. requires a, right, so reflective questions requires a, a specific response, a specific answer. They want you to give a specific answer, right? Right, and then 3.34, sorry, reflective questions. Just gonna correct this one. Reflective questions are questions that are paraphrased from your previous statement. Reflective questions are paraphrased from your previous statement. Previous statement. You said you are a good communication, you have good communication skills. Can you give me a practical example from your previous workplace that illustrates this point? Right. So let's move on to 3.34. 3.34, right, which is what we call a hypothetical questions. Hypothetical questions. Hypothetical questions. So this type of questions is used to test the applicant's level of intelligence, his ability to think fast, and his ability to solve a problem. Is used to test the applicant ability to think fast and also to solve problems and his intelligence. Right. That's hypothetical questions. For example, if you saw your colleague stealing company resources, what will you do? Your ability to think fast and to solve problems. Your ability to think fast and to solve problems. Let's go to 3.4. Provide the applicant interview Mr. Ravige with 8 hints to keep him in mind during the interview. Right. So we're going to provide tips before the interview for the applicant. Tips for the applicants before the interview. 3.4. Tips for the applicant before the interview, just before and after, right? So we're going to write, supposed to make sure that he's punctual. Do not be late or too early. Do not be late or too early. 2, posture, whereby you say you should show that you are confident and have self-image, a positive self-image. For example, you should not lean back or slouching in your chair, right? And then first impression are lasting. Make sure that your first impression is good. Your first impression, right? Another advice is use gestures and facial expressions correctly. Gestures, right? And expressions, right? Right. And then another one, use acceptable language. Use acceptable language. You're supposed to use an acceptable language, right? And also, if you're unsure about the question, ask politely. If you are unsure about the question, ask politely. Right. Switch your cell phone before you enter into the interview room. You need to switch off your cell phone. Your phone, right. Do not chew a gum. Do not smoke during the interview. Right. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. Listen carefully. One needs to listen carefully. Right. So let's go to question 3.5. Into which category does the above interview fall? Support your answer. This type of interview is what we call an informative interview. It is an informative interview because there is gaining and receiving and exchanging of information. There is gaining, obtaining, gaining, exchanging, and sharing of information, which is taking place. So that's why it's an informative interview. An informative interview. Right. So let's go to question 4. Question 4. Study the advertisement below and answer the question. So the question is under mass media and advertising. The question is under mass media and advertising, right? So we are going to study. There is this man who is running or is about to run, wearing Nike techies and the label for Nike sock. Right. So 4.1, State 4 functions of mass media and what each one does, e.g. the news function, information, right? So we're going to list functions of mass media and what it does. How does it function? Functions of mass media and what it does. Question 4. Question 4. Question 4. Right. We have what we call entertainment function. Entertainment function. This one is for to entertain. We have what we call service function. To render a service. Right. Is to service or to provide information. Right. We also have another function which is cultural function. Which is there to promote culture. To promote culture. We have what we call the watchdog function. Watchdog function. Watchdog function. Watchdog function. Which is there to act as a watchdog to the society. To act as a watchdog to the society, right? And to advertise, which is advertising. Advertising function. Which is to advertise. To advertise or to promote goods and services. Right. So let's go to 4.2. Name the function of mass media in the above advertisement and what it does. So here we are going to go to the advertisement and name the mass media function that is being discussed, right, in the advertisement, in the above advertisement, right? So this one is advertising. Advertising. It's an advertising function. Advertising. It's an advertising function, right? Right. So what is it doing? It is advertising Nike. They're advertising Nike products, right? So we're going to move on to question 5. Question 5, right? Question 5. Right. Read the scenario below and answer the questions. M&H accountants held their monthly meeting at 10:00 on 5 July. All members were present, thus a quorum existed. It was the secretary's task to take the minutes. She was a verbatim recording of the meeting and was able to compile thorough minutes. The chairperson joined the meeting at 1300 hours. Okay. So the chairperson was supposed to was having a task of what? Of taking minutes. Right. So the meeting held at 10 on the 5th of July, and it was adjourned by the chairperson at 2300. Right. Let's go to 5.1. What type of meeting is a monthly meeting? A monthly meeting is what you call a private meeting, or a general or a formal meeting. It is a private meeting, or a general meeting. Private meeting, or you can call it a formal meeting, or a general meeting. A general meeting. Right. So let's go to 5.2. 5.2. Define the following meeting terminologies. Right? So we're going to define the terms, right? 2.1. A quorum is the number of people who need to be present during the meeting. Is the minimum number of people who should be present for a meeting to be valid. A quorum. According to the Constitution, there is a certain number that should be present for a meeting to be valid. Right. So let's go to 5.2. 5.22. Right. A verbatim are words written exactly as they are spoken. Words are words written exactly as they were spoken. Right, that's what we call a verbatim. Right. So let's go to question 5.23. 5.23. Adjourn. Right. Adjourn, it is to end a meeting. before all the agendas are discussed. Before all the agendas are discussed. When a chairperson decides to end a meeting before the agendas are discussed, right? That's what you call adjourn, 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 right? Let's go to the last question, which is 5.3. State one duty of a chairperson when members are voting in a meeting. So, duty of a chairperson when members are voting is one, is supposed to count votes. 5.3. The chairperson supposed to count the votes after the vote, and is supposed to also has a duty to announces the voting results. He announces the voting results. And lastly, he exercises a casting vote. He exercises casting vote in the case of a deadlock. Right. So that's it. Please do not forget to subscribe, right, so that we'll bring more and more revision. And so thank you so much for your time. Make sure that you follow up on Metric Hub. There are many paper 2 revision and even topics, right, which were posted, right? So thank you so much. Have a good day.